Hello and welcome back to The Cat Who Project, a podcast where we take a deep dive into the world of Quill and Coco. Today we are heading into a whole new book, the third in the series, called The Cat Who Could Turn On and Off. So what is happening with Quillerin? Well, it's not all rosy. When we left Quillerin at the end of The Cat Who Ate Damish Modern, he was in quite a good place. He had solved the mysteries, he was living in Harry Norton's luxurious apartment at Villa Veranda, he was dating the young, attractive Cokie, and his little family had expanded to include the little female Siamese Yum Yum. But at the beginning of Book 3, Quillerin is single again and is living in a bleak room in a run-down hotel in an equally run-down neighbourhood called Junktown. He's getting noise complaints about the cats and he needs to find a new place to live, and fast. But to do that, Quillerin desperately needs some cash, and a rising competition at the Daily Fluxion might be the solution he's looking for. With the first prize of $3,000, honourable mentions receiving a frozen turkey, Quillerin comes up with the idea that he will write a winning piece on Junktown, a hard-hitting piece on the drug problems and other outcasts in the neighbourhood. But Arch Riker quickly knocks that idea on the head. The boss would never go for that angle, it would seem. Given that it's the festive season, the boss will only want feel-good Christmas-type stories. But Arch does love the idea of Christmas in Junktown, especially since his wife, Rosie, is such a serious junker. Quillerin is horrified by this, thinking that poor Rosie was a junkie. The confusion continues as Arch explains, "Yeah, she got hooked a couple of years ago and it's been keeping me poor ever since." It's quite funny, but soon enough, Arch clarifies that junk is another name for antiques and not in the way of narcotics. This was actually a clever little clue because the murderer in the story is actually dealing in narcotics, leading him to commit 2 murders. So Quillerin reluctantly heads out to Zwinger Street in Junktown, where all the antique shops are, and even though it has an old-time charm, it's bleak and cold. There are no Christmas decorations and all the shops are closed even though it's past 11 a.m. and they should be open. The shops all have quirky names like Bitter Junk, The Junkery, Junk Trunk, Tectiques, The Blue Dragon and The 3 Weird Sisters. Quillerin's first assignment in Junktown is to cover an auction, a liquidation of stock of a particular antiques dealer, Andy Gantz, who tragically died a couple of months before. At the auction, Quillerin meets a few key people, including Iris Cobb, who owns her own antique shop called The Junkery, as well as the old run-down Victorian Cobb Mansion. The Cobb Mansion has 2 shops on the ground floor, her own and Ben Nicholas's shop, Better Junk. On the upper floor, there are 3 apartments. Iris and her husband, Cece Cobb, live in the larger apartment, while Ben Nicholas lives in the front apartment above his shop. And the apartment at the back is the apartment that Iris offers to Quillerin to rent. It's the apartment that Andy Gantz lived in, but this doesn't bother Quillerin at all. He accepts her offer and moves the cats in the same day. So with his new digs and his new beat, the scene is set for the cat who could turn on and off. So Quillerin sets about immersing himself in Junktown, getting to know the different proprietors and the world of junking. But the more he learns, the more he suspects that Andy's death was not an accident. There are 2 more deaths in this book. One is a homeless drunk man. At first, Quillerin thinks that the death could be related to Andy's death, but that theory is later ruled out. The other death was a murder, and the victim was Iris Cobb's husband, Cece Cobb. The whole book only spans 9 days, and it really was a jam-packed week for Quillerin. He visits different shops, gets to know the proprietors, he researches for his articles, and, of course, he quietly and persistently investigates the murders. Of course, there is a little bit of romance in this book. Quillerin is no longer dating Cokie. She dumped him for an engineer. But he becomes quite enamoured by Mary Duckworth, the woman who had been in the relationship with Andy Gantz. I find the character of Mary to be quite similar to Zoe Lamberth from the first Cat Who novel. Both characters were sophisticated, both were vulnerable, grieving the loss of a partner, and both apparently had great knees. Yes, you heard that right. In fact, in chapter 15, Quillerin considers himself a connoisseur of knees, which is quite funny because in this book, Quillerin has some pretty bad luck with his own knees. First, an avalanche of snow from a shop front dumps on him and he injures his right knee. Then he injures his other knee whilst wrestling with the murderer at the climax of the story. On top of that, Quillerin faced more danger when he had a very near miss whilst out scrounging with Ben Nicholas at the old theatre. Ben encourages Quillerin to retrieve a sculpted crest from a box on the mezzanine level. The sculpted crests from the other 3 boxes had already been scrounged, and why not this one? Well, because this box was unstable, and according to Mary, Ben would have known this. As Quillerin leaned over the banister, there was a wrenching of timbers and a crash. Quillerin jumped to the back just in time as the banister crashes down below. There was so much to love about this book. The setting was great, it had quirky characters, and there was a real sense of community. A Christmas block party was organised and all the proprietors, and including Quillerin, agreed to keep Iris's shop open while she was away, each taking turns to run it and sell on her behalf. And then, at the end of the book, we find out that Quillerin has been working behind the scenes to help the community of Zwinger Street. It tells Mary that there will be a landmark preservation committee created, promoted by the Fluxion and underwritten by Mary's banker father, and he's managed to negotiate so that scrounging will no longer be illegal. Mary is amazed and asks Quill if he did all of this for Junktown, and he says, no, mostly for you. And what about Coco and Yum Yum? This was the first book where Yum Yum was properly featured, and it was lovely having her dainty, gentle nature working with Coco and Quillerin. And Coco was at his best in Book 3, gently guiding Quillerin to prime clues, uncovering others, and of course rescuing Quillerin at the end of the book from an imminent attack by the murderer. In our next episode, we will look at the mysteries in the cat who could turn on and off. I hope you enjoyed this episode. My name is Rohan. Thank you for listening. Bye now.